As a sales leader, one of the things that's probably top of mind for you is how do you determine who in your organization you want to raise up as the next leader? And then, of course, how do you do that? And so today we're really fortunate to have our guest, Dino Perone, with us. Dino has a background as an Army officer and a Ranger. He has spent almost 30 years in sales leadership for AT&T, Charter Communications, leading some very large sales organizations, putting up billions of dollars worth of revenue. And Dino, we're really excited to have you here to talk about this topic. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So what I'd really like to jump into on this, if you don't mind, is as you're sitting in the leader's seat, and let's say you've got some directors, maybe, and frontline sales managers, and then, of course, you've got some sellers. There are multiple levels at which you're going to be trying to advance people as you grow your organization and as you grow the individuals on your team. So what are some of the things that you specifically look for when you're deciding who you want to invest in and who you might want to elevate to that next level?
Yeah, sure. So at an early age, beginning when I was in the military, leadership is a fundamental imperative of any organization.
Indeed, yes.
Right? And leadership isn't just for those that have a title of sales manager, director, vice president, chief revenue officer, right? Everybody can be a leader, right? Because in the military, we've heard these stories before, right? When whole organizations no longer exist and the individual in the trenches, the only one left, he or she now becomes the leader of the organization and needs to step up in order to continue the mission.
Wow.
And accomplish it, right? So leadership should be taught to everyone.
That's
not
great.
Just those with a title.
That's great. So you're saying then as you build your team, you're pouring in leadership knowledge, leadership expectations, leadership skills to everyone, not just the ones that you want to become the next manager.
Right.
That's phenomenal.
There's 3 areas that I evaluate on, and it's be, know, and do.
I love that framework, be, know, and do. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, let's go. So be, there's 2 areas in be. You have to have integrity, right? And integrity is either on or it's off. It exists or it doesn't. There's no in between. There are no degrees of integrity. It's very binary. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to have character, right? Character is, do you act professionally? Do you know what right looks like, right? Are you an individual that displays character no matter what the situation is? That's B. Know is know your craft, right? Know your functional area and know yourself. And if you're weak in any area, right, either technically, leadership-wise, functionally, know yourself to go get help, right? Leaders need to be able to ask for help, but know when they need it. Right? The do is the third one. You have to behave like a leader, right? As a leader. And behavior means you have to have the courage to communicate, right? So do is communicating with courage under any circumstance. If you take be, know, and do and evaluate existing sales leaders or any leader for that matter, as well as individual contributors, right? I think you'll have a good framework to make some good decisions on your next leaders.
I love this. I mean, it's so foundational. It's a layer beneath, their technical expertise or their gift of gab, or how well they build relationships with people on their teams, et cetera. It's a layer underneath that's a foundation that everything else is built upon, which is awesome. If you don't mind, I want to ask you a question about this B, though, because this is something I've Well, I've been hearing about this for 20 or 30 years, I guess. Here's the question when it relates to integrity and character. Is that something that you think can be taught or can be learned? Or is that just something that you either show up this morning and you've either got it or you don't have it?
Yeah, I'm in the camp of the former, right?
Okay.
It can be taught, right? Now, most of us know the difference between right and wrong. We're taught right and wrong generally as children, right? And we evolve, we grow, we mature. Our perspectives of right and wrong may change, but we know what that means, right? The difference between right and wrong. We place that in any environment, whether it's military or corporate or not for profit, right? Integrity, right, and character can be taught because you can define what that means in those environments.
That's really good, because when you were talking about right and wrong, what I was thinking is, well, maybe I don't understand what's right and wrong. Maybe I haven't been, I don't understand the policies of how we do it here at our company. I don't understand maybe best practices when it comes to the sales process or engaging clients, et cetera. And so I can imagine myself, if I were just undereducated, I might not really understand what right and wrong is.
So lack of understanding or ignorance, right, on an extreme is no excuse to not know what right looks like, right? If you feel it's not right or you feel it is right, right, then go get a second opinion.
Yeah.
And that falls into the know, which means know yourself, ask for help, or ask for a second opinion, right? And then go with it.
So now, in your experience, have you developed in the teams that you've been leading, that you've been doing this a very long time, for decades, so do you have a somewhat formal, like, leadership development track for people, and you invest in really just the education and the learning and development required for people to elevate themselves over time in one or more of these three areas?
Absolutely. Great organizations invest in their leaders and their people, right, through training, right, whether it's technical, functional, or leadership and management, right? And you have to take a look at each one of those areas. We're talking about leadership today, but absolutely, there's many experiences to increase one's leadership capabilities, whether they're in person, whether it's training, whether it's education, or being placed into a experimental role to try something different and see how you react as a leader and grow into that role and be successful. So absolutely, each organization should have a leadership development program.
Well, Dino, it's kind of been a little bit of a cliche over the years, where you simply take your best salesperson and you call that person your next sales manager, with no really regard to some of the three things that you said there, but more importantly, with no real experience as a manager and no real training or guidance on how to be a good manager. And so how do you kind of balance that and make sure that you're not putting somebody in a position where they're maybe just not even a good fit, but more importantly, that we're not giving them the resources they need to be successful?
Yeah, it's a dilemma that I've seen all too often,
Yes.
right? And so have many of you, let's be honest. And the best seller does not make the best sales leader.
Yeah.
And I would purport that holds true across any function, right? And so when we look at, well, what makes the best seller, right? Hits quota, exceeds quota, consistently. So what's implied there is they are very technically savvy and astute. And that addresses the second area. They know their craft. Right? But there's two other areas, right? B, do they have integrity? Yes, no. Are they an individual of high character?
Yes.
Right? And then the bookend, do they have the courage, right, to communicate in very, very extreme situations, in
Yes.
awkward situations, right? Or do they become closed, right? Because you need those as well as technical or functional expertise and knowledge.
Yeah. So it's this communication area that probably, now that's something that can be taught, it seems to me, right? You said you think we probably can teach character and integrity by explaining what it is and helping people understand expectations on them, et cetera. But the knowing, that knowledge, that can be taught, and the doing, the courage of how to communicate in difficult situations, that also sounds to me like something that can be taught. So if you have a development program for people to become great leaders, those things can be baked into that, it seems to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so
Right.
good.
And you hit on communication, especially, right?
Yep.
Communication not only with customers, but with individuals in coaching,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And even internally with partners, right? When collaborating, right? All of those are different audiences and require different communication approaches and styles.
Yeah. Now I know that in your through your career, you've worked in multi-channel environments, and even including marketing in some of your purview in years past. And so, can you speak just a little bit about leadership styles and maybe what's required of a leader in some of those different situations? Because I would obviously indirect versus direct, and inside sales and distributed sales forces where nobody sees each other. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Absolutely. So just to reiterate, be, know, and do holds true across any environment, in my opinion.
Right.
But when you are in a marketing role or a finance role, certainly the know aspect, right? Knowing your craft, knowing that functional area, or seeking to better understand the nuances is important, right? And so that's a differentiator. So you as a leader, if you don't have those skills or they're weak, right? Job number one is to go improve on them immediately. And it may include bringing in your team and communicating, I need help in this area.
That's so good. You know, I wanted to share with you, I've got a little list of 5 things that I share a lot of times in my workshops. And I wanted to run these past you and get your feedback on this. When I'm working with senior sales leaders or directors talking about how do you select the right person to become the next sales manager? Or in fact, what are some of the things you're looking for in a good sales manager if you're hiring somebody from the outside? So I'll list these 5 with you, and you can give me your feedback on this. Number 1 is I think we're looking for somebody that eagerly embraces change, because it seems to me that change is become the kind of the hallmark of business today, whether this is changes in organizational structure or changes in territory or changes in comp plan or changes in product set. I mean, something's going to be different 12 months from now than it is right now. So eagerly embrace change. Number 2, accepts personal responsibility and accountability. So that's a character trait that you can kind of see whether this person's a frontline seller or a sales manager. You can see which one of them they blame other people and are constantly trying to pass the buck, and it's not my fault, and they make promises that they don't keep, et cetera. So that's number 2. Number 3 is solution or outcome oriented. So I got enough people that can point out the problem. What I need is some people that can actually come up with how we're going to solve the problem or what we're going to focus on here for what we'd like it to be different, and come up with 3 ways to get it done, along with maybe the one that you'd recommend that we should, a course of action that we should follow. Number 4 is puts team first ahead of ego and image. And that's a big one for a lot of salespeople who, by nature, I think the sales profession attracts people with strong personal, drive and motivation, but putting ego and image aside for the betterment of the team and making other people look good is part of what makes a great leader. And then number 5, never stops learning and growing. I shared this with you before we started the session today, but one of the things that becomes, and honestly is heartbreaking to me, is to see a director or a vice president arrange some learning and development for his team. his or her team, and I come there and I'm doing the training and they don't even bother coming in the room. And my thinking is, how much credibility are you loaning to this process and to what you're asking people to learn and adopt if you won't even come in and sit in and be part of it? And number two, how could you possibly reinforce it if you weren't even in the room?
Yeah.
And so
I think that fourth area is super important, right? It speaks to being a servant leader and putting your team before yourself, right? And yeah, you may have been the top dog when you were a seller, right? You got to put that aside and you have to replicate yourself so that everybody on your team now becomes top dogs, plural, right? And so that's probably the biggest obstacle that I see in first-time leaders. Is they do the work instead of teaching and serving others so that they know how to do their roles way better.
Yeah. So this replicating yourself, transferring of skills, letting people run with it, and then come back and report how they did. That's a big challenge. I was talking with one director of sales recently, and he confessed, he said, Bill, I feel like that, honestly, unless I'm there, nothing happens. And I thought to myself, oh boy, we've got some work to do because you can't be everywhere. I mean, he's a director over, I believe he's got 5 sales managers, and they've each done 5 or 6 frontline sellers. And I thought, he's got an organization now of what, 30 or 40 people? And nothing happens unless he's there. He's going to get pretty tired pretty quick. And not very much can happen because there's only 24 hours in a day where he can be places. And so it's this replication, I think, that's really crucial in this role, isn't it?
Yeah, but that fifth area that you mentioned, right, around credibility, right? And all leaders need credibility. And if you're not communicating, right, your credibility through actions, right, and behaviors, right, then you can't expect your organization to also act and make things happen, right? You have to lead the way through your actions and credibility. So that might be the problem there.
Yeah, that's good. Dino, have you observed over the years like some warning signs as you're either hiring from the outside or promoting from within? Any 2 or 3 or 6 things that you're looking for that might be a red flag for you before you would bring someone into a leadership position on your team?
Absolutely. Leaders are often, at the forefront of extreme situations, right? So you have to ask extreme questions.
Okay.
And you have to be able to not only understand or listen and understand to the words, but you also have to listen for the cues, the tone, right? The delivery, right? Those are all important, right? So come up with some really good extreme questions that place those leaders. And for an example, in a sales situation, you've got $1 million deal hanging in the balance, and you received information that you should not have received. You received competitive pricing information from a competitor, right? That breaks a bunch of rules in most industries and most company policies, right? What did you do with that? What would you do in that situation, right? Read, listen, and understand for the answer to questions like that.
Yeah. It's really nice. It's a great question. And I would think that questions like those would reveal your be, know, and do, wouldn't it? Because you just described the question.
Not in that case, it's an integrity issue.
Yes. That's designed to reveal integrity and character. So that's awesome. And I suppose you have a list of questions that you've developed over the years that you use for interview process,
I do.
right? We might have to get into that into a separate episode.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, anything else you'd like to leave our viewers and listeners with in terms of just to keep in mind, top of mind, when it comes to selecting the right leader or how to raise leaders up and create success among those leaders that you raise up?
Yeah. First is to understand that every great organization has great leaders, right? And so have a process to identify, develop, and retain those leaders in the organization.
Yeah, retain. That we'll probably do another episode on that, because I hear all the time from sales leaders. Of course, what I'm trying to do is attract and retain top talent. And I think that recruiters and our competitors have gotten really good at trying to lure people away. So maybe I'll invite you back for another conversation around that at some point, because I'm sure our listeners would love to hear some of your suggestions. But thank you very much, Dino, for taking the time with us today. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks a lot, Bill. I welcome the opportunity again to join you and your audience.
Thank you, sir. Take care.